So I bought Armaf Space Age, and I'm hoping it to be a really nice clone of one of my fragrances for life, which is Byredo Space Rage. I believe Byredo Space Rage was my very first Byredo that I bought. This sometimes gets a bit of hate, but to me, Space Rage is a truly unique scent that smells absolutely fantastic. So I came across Space Age when I was looking for cheapies to buy, and I was like, okay, these two gotta be sort of inspired by this. I mean, at least I'm hoping it to be a clone of this. So I'm gonna open this up and try it out for the first time and give you my first impressions of it. But before I do that, just a quickie on Space Rage. So this was a limited edition, and they had one bottle left of this limited edition, and the guy in the store said that Space Rage is really close to Byredo Pulp. So before buying this, I took Space Rage on a paper strip, and I took Byredo Pulp on another paper strip, and basically compared the two over lunch, and came to the conclusion over that hour that Space Rage is really close to Pulp. Even though they are very similar, I ended up paying a bit more for this limited edition bottle simply because it's a bit more fun to own something that is a limited edition. This was a limited edition, but Byredo Pulp, I believe, is still around. Now I'm hoping Space Age is a clone of Space Rage, and that it's a good clone. Now looking at the picture, it seems like this is the same sort of a bottle or bottle design as Armaf Beach Party. And this is the actual box right here. Let me see if I can open it up. And that's the bottle inside. Let me bring it out. And yeah, it's the bottle design that I don't like. So this is how the bottle looks like, and yeah, I'm not a big fan of the design of these, and this is how the OG Space Rage looks like. But like always, it's the juice inside that truly matters, so let's spray this one on my left arm. Give me Space Rage vibes, please. Okay, perhaps this is just these first few sprays. Perhaps a bit of Space Rage vibes in the opening, but there's definitely a bit of a difference. So this is a scent I know really well, but I'm gonna spray Space Rage on my right arm just to compare, and let's see. Yeah, there's definitely a difference. Space Rage goes in with a big, heavy, quite intense, fruity and sweet blend, whereas this definitely smells a lot less fruity and in a way perhaps a bit more sort of a vanillic and less intensely fresh. Or perhaps less intensely fresh isn't the right way to sort of describe the difference in freshness when you compare these two. I'm gonna say that the freshness is different. But right away, the main differences are definitely quite clear, at least to me. Space Rage goes all in with quite sort of an intense kind of fruitiness. The fruitiness in Space Rage is, at least to me, quite unique because this has a more sort of a ripe kind of fruitiness, like a mix of different fruits that are a bit on the sort of a ripe side, and it's a bit sweet with a bit of freshness to it, and it does have this sort of a kind of fizziness to it that I think is fantastic. Not quite sure what kind of fruitiness is in Space Age. To me, actually, this opens up with quite a prominent dose of vanilla, a bit of fruitiness, a bit of sweetness and a bit of freshness. And like I said, the freshness in these two are not the same. These two are actually quite different. So do not expect Space Age to be very similar to Space Rage, because unfortunately it's not. And the more Space Age moves away from the opening and into the heart of it, the more I feel this goes into something that is even more intensely vanillic. The fruitiness, however, has changed a bit, and I actually like this more in the mids. than in the opening. The freshness that I picked up on in the opening feels a lot softer at the heart of it, and it has been replaced by a bit of florals. And comparing it to Space Rage, I mean, these two are so different, at least based on my first impressions and the very first few sprays of Space Age. Space Rage basically goes into something that is even more fruity, even sweeter, and that sort of fizziness is even more intense in the mid. So at the heart of it, these two are still quite different. Space Age goes in a more sort of a vanillic direction, and I actually recognize that vanilla from some other Armaf fragrance. There's definitely a bit of fruitiness and sweetness and a floral touch to Space Age, whereas Space Rage still is intensely fruity and sweet, with a sort of a ripe kind of fruitiness, and it has this fantastic, what I think, a fantastic kind of sort of a fizziness to it. And the more Space Age heads into the dry run, the more I feel what I got in the mids is basically even more intense in the dry run. So this to me is still primarily a vanillic scent with a bit of fruitiness to it, definitely a bit of sweetness to it, and a floral touch. But there's definitely a difference in the dry run, and in the dry run to me, there's something sort of a musky, slightly powdery to it. The dry run of Space Rage is where it finally starts to change a bit. So this is still intensely fruity, intensely sweet. It still has a bit of that fantastic sort of fizziness to it. But in the dry down, this actually, that fruitiness and sweetness and sort of fizziness starts to get balanced up at least a little bit by a bit of woodiness. So just to clarify, intensely fruity and sweet in the opening through to the mids, still intensely fruity and sweet and sort of fizzy in the dry down. However, the dry down is where you get a bit of woodiness that starts to balance up its fruitiness and sweetness. Space Age basically, from the opening through to the dry down, at least to my nose, is mostly a vanillic scent with a prominent dose of fruitiness and a prominent dose of sweetness. It has a bit of freshness in the opening that gets quite a lot softer in the mids. It starts to get a bit floral instead in the mids, and the dry down is where the whole thing gets a bit powdery and musky. They are definitely not that similar. Now, I would absolutely love to know from you if you have both of these, or if you tried Pulp. Do you feel Pulp is very similar to Space Age? So moving on to compliments and mass appeal, is Space Age a compliment getting kind of fragrance for a man? I think this is definitely quite a likable fragrance for a man. However, don't expect this to be on the same level of mass appeal like some of the top compliment getters out there. This is basically vanillic with a bit of fruitiness and a bit of sweetness. So yeah, a likable scent for sure, but maybe not the top compliment getter. I gotta wear it more to get a proper feel for its performance, but based on my first impressions of Space Age, I don't think this is a strong fragrance. I'm gonna put the performance slightly above average. So here are my initial thoughts on usage, so like seasons and occasions. I do feel that Space Age is a fragrance that is mostly leaning towards spring, summer nights, fall and winter. As for occasions, I mean, this is mostly a vanillic scent that's a bit fruity and a bit sweet, so I do feel you can use Space Age to pretty much any occasion. However, I wouldn't spray this on when going to the gym. So who is Armaf Space Age for? Let's make this super easy. If you are someone who's looking for and enjoys fruity, sweet fragrances with a bit of vanilla, then you most likely enjoy this. If you absolutely dislike anything with vanilla in it, then stay away. If you absolutely dislike anything sort of fruity in fragrances, then stay away. And it does have a floral touch. To my nose, its floral side is definitely taking backseat to pretty much everything else. However, if you're super sensitive to anything floral, then make sure you stay away. And like I said before, I do not find these to be the same. So if you're looking for, like I was, a Space Rage clone, and if you're expecting something that is super similar to Space Rage, then I would probably not go for this one. So what are some of the alternatives to Armaf Space Age? Looking at sort of a primarily fruity and sweet fragrances, I'm gonna say Tiziana Terence, which I feel is a lot more sweet and fruity intense than Space Age. Also Byredo Pulp, which is basically quite similar to Byredo Space Age. That one is also, at least to me, a lot more fruity intense and a lot more sweet if you compare it to this. You also have Zerjaf Erba Pura, and for a different kind of fruity scent, there's Juliet Has a Gun Pear Ink, which basically focuses around pear, a bit of musk and freshness. Two great affordable fruity sweet fragrances are Zara Tender Amber and Zara Tender Amber Intense. Make sure you check out my reviews of both of those. All of the ones I mentioned are fruity fragrances. However, I also feel all of them are quite different compared to Space Age. So what are my final thoughts on Armaf Space Age? So in a nutshell, I bought Space Age hoping that this would be a clone of Byredo Space Rage. And right away, there's definitely a difference. And that difference continued from the opening through to the dry down. I was truly hoping to find something very similar to one of my fragrances for life, Space Rage. However, Space Age, while it doesn't smell bad, I do feel that its fruitiness and sweetness lacks a bit of personality. I also feel the vanilla is pretty much taking over. Now this is just based on my very first impressions of Space Age, but I do feel that the fruity side, which to me is what should give this scent most of its personality, actually lacks a bit of personality, and the vanilla that is dominating this, it doesn't make it stand out that much. So while it doesn't smell bad, I'm actually a bit disappointed. I knew there was a chance that these two would not be similar, but I was hoping this to be a good scent overall, and I don't think it's a bad one, but I also feel it lacks a bit of personality, and that's why I don't recommend Space Age. There are definitely other fruity and sweet fragrances out there, including some fantastic affordable ones that I feel does fruity and sweet better than Space Age. So this is where I want to hear from you. How do you feel about Space Age? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you feel it's super similar to Space Rage or Byredo Pop? Let me know in the comments. Please drop a like and subscribe for more. Make sure you check out my other videos over there, and I'll see you in the next one.